I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, "No, no, 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 we're going to do this." And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This guy had his gun. The police were chasing him. He was ready to do suicide by cop. And the turnaround he has had since that moment is incredible. I first met Dan Martell in 2013. We both gave a talk about some of the horrible things that had happened in our lives. He gave his talk, which was much worse situation than I could even imagine. And he told me something in this podcast 9 years later that I had no idea, no clue about. And I was astonished. And also, he's the author of Buy Back Your Time. It's a great book for any entrepreneur or anybody who just feels like they're so busy, they don't even have time to think or be creative or do what they love. I highly recommend people pre-order his book, Buy Back Your Time. Go to buybackyourtime.com. But first, listen to his story, starting with guns.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
Okay, well, first off, Dan and I met at this contest where we had to give a talk, and Tim Ferriss was giving a talk, Ryan Holiday, Dan Martell, Lewis Howes, me,
Mark Echo,
Joey Coleman.
yeah.
And then people voted there was like a contest. People voted which talk gave the most value, and the winner would get $30,000. And everybody kind of assumed, I think, that Tim Ferriss was going to win, but Joey Coleman won, and he had a very powerful technique for winning. But I remember your talk was riveting, and you mentioned some of that story, which was an incredible story in your just out book.
I do, yeah. That what's crazy, James, is that was the first time I'd ever shared that ever in my life, was the one you saw. And the only reason that was the first
riveting.
time.
Like, did you practice it?
No, zero. I'll tell you the backstory. It was real quick. I was going to do a talk on, I think, integrated life or balances bullshit. And Jason said to us, I didn't know it was a contest. So what happened is the morning he announced, like, the best speaker as voted by the audience will win $25,000 to the charity of their choice. My charity is the rehab center that saved my life as a 17-year-old. And something just told me, like, you're just not going to win talking about business and balance. And I decided I was going to share my story. I went back to the hotel room in the morning, outlined something, scratched it. And then when I came back, check this out. My wife, she's got a big smile and she goes, hey, my parents wanted to surprise you. They're actually going to be here for your talk.
Oh my
And I
God.
was like, my wife had never heard that story. They obviously hadn't. And
Wait a second. Your wife had never heard that story?
dude, I didn't tell anybody.
Well, don't you think okay, we're going to get to this story in a second, but just from a couples counseling point of view, did you think your wife was going to be upset that you never confided in her, this like dark past you had? And you almost pulled a gun on cops.
Yeah. Not really. I don't know. I guess I didn't because it was such a long time ago, and like there was no part of that like there was. Yeah, I never thought like like if something traumatic happened to her and she never told me. We were engaged at the time. Like she was pregnant, but we weren't married technically. But yeah, no, I wasn't concerned about that. I mean, I was scared, James. Like ashamed. I was worried that if I shared that story, that my investors at the time I was working on Clarity and just raised a bunch of money, and I was just worried that literally people would be like, oh, Dan's an evil person, or he should have told us. Like I was more concerned about my investors feeling that way than my wife.
Yeah, because from an investor's point of view, a typical due diligence question is, hey, we did all the due diligence, looks great. Last thing, is there anything we should know? And you clearly didn't tell them. Because
No,
maybe you thought, well,
no.
but correctly, maybe you thought, okay, they don't really need to know this. I'm a different person now.
And I was 17 at the time. I wasn't an adult. I didn't have a criminal record. I'd been sober since. Like, I felt like I had kind of repented. And it was funny because I had this belief that I'll share it once I'm successful enough. And literally my filter was on Oprah or equivalent. It was ridiculous. Growing up in Eastern Canada, it was just a stupid kind of like ceiling. Maybe that's why I said it, so that I could go through life and never share it. And yeah, I owe it to Jason for, setting a scenario and a context that kind of forced me to share it. And when I came off stage, I remember Tim actually pulled me aside. I'd known Tim probably 3 years, just because of San Francisco. I was living down in the valley. And he said, man, I've known you and I never knew that part of you. As if I shared it all the time. Like, see, he thought he just never heard me share it and that I shared it all the time. And then I had like 7 friends come up to me that knew me really well, like Clay Bear and many others. And same thing. They were like, dude, I didn't know. Why didn't you ever tell me? And I was like, dude, that's the first time I've ever told anybody. And
Well, Dan,
my
we're
in-laws.
we're certainly teasing this story quite a bit. So just tell the story right now. Like it's a riveting story. I'm gonna just let you go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a pretty challenging environment. Second oldest of 4 in my family. My mom was an alcoholic. She grew up adopted, and her parents were both alcoholics, and they just struggled with a lot of like, they did the best they could with what they knew, but there was a lot of like trauma, and I developed anger issues when I was very young. Got diagnosed with ADHD, put on Ritalin when I was 11. My dad was in sales, so he was literally gone 5-6 days a week. And my mom raised us, but like she had some real demons that she dealt with, and it came out in
And
some pretty unfortunate ways.
was she an alcoholic while she was raising you? I mean, was she
She was,
when was
yeah,
she an alcoholic?
our whole lives. I only found out my parents got divorced when we were 13. And I found out later, like when I was 16, 17, the reason my dad left her is because she wouldn't quit. And he,
Mm.
like, I love my mom. We have a beautiful relationship today, but she sometimes through her, drinking and her mood, she got to a place where, because we were crazy boys, she had 3 boys and she raised us, like she would throw us in the shower and, to try like just water us down to try to calm us down if we were fighting and stuff. Just stuff that to her felt normal because probably what she grew up in, but obviously had a really impact on me. And when I was 14, or no, when I was 12, I got taken out of my house, put into foster care because I had a rage inside of me that was just, I don't know, James, if you've ever gotten so upset where you just see red and it's just this internal scream. But I used to get like that as a 10, 11, 12-year-old. And
And
my
what
parents,
happened that led to the foster care? Because usually that's on the parent side. They want, the authorities want you to go into foster care.
it was my parents called the police because they were worried that I was going to burn the house down while they were sleeping.
And when you were 14.
I was 12.
Wow, like what? Why did they think that? Like, what did you say?
Because I would say that. I would get to the point. Now, later on in life, I learned that I did that as a cry for attention because when my dad was traveling in sales, and if I acted that way, my mom would have to call him and he would come home. But this came out in therapy years later. But that's what would happen. I would just get so upset. I just couldn't contain myself. I don't know if maybe other people can't really, I don't know. I would get so upset. It was like I would hyperventilate and just see red and just like absolutely destroy my room.
Like, and this is related to your mom's, being an alcoholic. Was she bipolar or was she self-medicating in some way? Were you self-medicating in some way?
Not at the time, no. No self-medication at that age. My mom definitely probably was with the alcohol. 100% was. And yeah, sometimes she'd physically, punish us in ways that is probably just definitely what you wouldn't get away with today,
And so you were in foster care. Like, what was, I didn't know this part. What was that like? Like, what was, where
I
did you
lasted
go?
6 months. I ended up in a crisis center for a couple weeks till they find like a foster parent, which is a pretty traumatizing event. At 12 years old, being taken out of your home and waking up in it was essentially like a house, but there's 4 rooms and there's staff 24/7 because I threatened to kill myself and suicidal thoughts. And yeah, the challenge was that I got put into foster care, and my foster dad, I was his first kid. So like I walked all over him. Like it got to a place where, first day we go up to grocery store and he's like, what do you want to eat? And I was like, oh, well, I eat chocolate Pop-Tarts and hot dogs. He's like, that's it? I go, yeah, call my mom. That's all I eat. So he spent $200 on chocolate Pop-Tarts and hot dogs. Like, I mean, it was kind
Oh
of
my God.
a bad situation because like I just took advantage of everything. I mean, I get to he bought me a pellet gun, and that we would go to the range and practice together as like a bonding thing. But then I found out where he used to hide it, and then I blew out all the street lights. And he was like, "Hey, do you know why all the street lights are busted on our street?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think it's this kid up the street, John." Like, he's like, "That's so weird," Like he was just kind of clueless, like these kind of like adults that don't have never done anything bad. They just see the good in everybody. And it got to a point where I ended up, we were gone on vacation. We went on a camping trip and I convinced him to buy fireworks for the camping trip. But that night,
Wait, hasn't he learned from his experience yet at this point?
no, dude, I met him years later to apologize because he was just the sweetest person. He didn't ever have another foster kid after me. So here's what happened. We went on the camping trip. I told him I don't want to use the fireworks. He's like, well, why did you make me buy a bunch of Roman candles? I did it because I wanted them personally. So when he was gone one Saturday, I actually went in his room and found where he'd hid them. And I started cutting up these Roman candles in his living room. And I had newspapers out and a wax candle to reseal. I figured I'd cut off the 25%. He wouldn't know how long they were. And as I'm putting this thing together, and there's a pile of like Roman candle dust and like, a steak knife from the kitchen, cutting this open in the candle, and the whole pile catches fire and it goes off in his house. Like we're talking 4th of July level smoke. And this is like hardwood floor, like super like bookshelves and beautiful furniture. And I run into the kitchen to try to grab like the little white fire extinguisher underneath the sink that he showed me on day one. And like, it does nothing to like try to stop the friggin', blue, green, red, like little friggin' fire bombs flying all over the place, putting holes in his furniture. And soon as like kind of things settled down, I went and packed up my bags and ran away. And I think I went on the run for about 3 days. I was 12 at that point. And when I came back, the cops found me at my friend's house because, it was like Friday or Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday, I told him that Dave said I could sleep over, and then they called him, and he now knew where I was, called the police because of my foster or the social worker, and they picked me up. And when they brought me back to Dave's place, I could hear them talking about me, and he said, he was emotional. He's just like, I can't deal with this. And he just broke down and said, you guys got to take him. So I ended up doing a year in a group home with people that were 3-4 years older than me, criminal records, and teaching me stuff I probably should never been learning at that age. Drugs, things about girls, and Yeah, life just spiraled out of control. My parents got divorced shortly after that and got turned on to different types of drugs, PCP, marijuana.
Do you ever feel responsibility for your parents getting divorced?
I did at the time. It was probably when I was 17, towards the end of I did 11 months in rehab, that me and my dad had a really good conversation. That's when he told me about my mom's drinking and how bad it got and what he saw her doing to us, and asked of her to stop or he was going to leave. So, but for a long time, that shame and guilt was inside. I mean, I just felt like 100% it was my fault. I think any kid would, even if you didn't experience what I experienced.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. So you begin the book, Buy Back Your Time, with this story. I guess you're around 17 in this story. What happened? What led to that story? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, what happened was I I ended up in prison when I was 15, got in trouble with the law, drugs, shoplifting, and I got out and I said I would, clean up my act, new group friends, and I lasted a day. Ended up back with the same people. And it was a year later about I ended up just getting such a dark place. I was on the run from the police because I'd got in trouble for growing weed in my house, and I had guns under my bed, and my mom called the police. And I stole a car, and I had a handgun in a backpack. And I decided to head to Montreal. My uncle lived there. So I lived in the east coast of Canada, and it was about a 12-hour drive. And, I was high on pills and drinking while I was driving. And I mean, I was 16. I didn't even have a driver's license. And I took an exit off the highway to get some gas, and there was a routine roadblock. And the cops asked me, for my driver's license. I told them I forgot at home, and they said, well, registration for the car. I said, well, it's my mom's car. And when they asked me to pull over, I just stepped on it, just gunned it, took off, got, I think I watched too many action movies growing up because I was like, thinking I could find some area to hide out and run into the woods and make my escape. But I told myself before I stole the car that if the police stopped me, I was just going to pull the gun and let them take my life. And what happened was I saw an open garage door in this neighborhood, and I came into the driveway carrying way too much speed and just smashed into the side of the corner of the garage in the house. Airbags go off, and it was just like this big noise, and I wasn't wearing a seatbelt, so I hit my head, and then I went for the gun. And as I was pulling on kind of the handle, it got stuck between the handrest and the bag. I just kept pulling on it because I wanted to take my life. I just didn't want to go back to jail, and I didn't have any self-worth. I didn't think I was worth a living. And before I knew it, the police opened the door and grabbed me. Again, I'm not buckled in. They literally just pulled me out of the car. Didn't even I'd say dragged me across the front lawn, floated across the front lawn, and threw me in the back of the cop car. And I woke up sober the next morning, wondering what my life was going to look like. And I just remembered having this feeling that I'm alive, and the fact that I was alive, maybe somebody was looking out for me. I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in a higher power, but something made me kind of think about that. And that was the beginning of an incredibly long road of recovery and rebuilding, the trust I'd lost with my brothers and young, junior high friends, and just so many people I'd burned along the way. So I ended up in prison for 5 months. And when I got released to a rehab center called Portage.
And were your parents involved in your life at all? Were they they hire lawyers? Were they negotiating for your sentence?
It's so crazy. My dad, sorry, man. When I went the first time, they came to visit, and it was so hard on my dad that he said, if you ever come back here again, I'm not coming to visit. I just need you to know that. And he just got super emotional. I'd never seen my dad cry. My grandparents died when I was 8. First time I see my dad cry, never again. And he was just super emotional. So when I went the second time, I kind of knew I'm here on my own. So didn't come to court, didn't get me help. He did what I wish every parent would do is just let your child hit rock bottom, and it's so tough. Like, that's why I get emotional, because I have 2 boys now, and like, I can't even imagine. But the day I got out, he actually picked me up, because he's the one that drove me from the prison. I went to court. They released me to the rehab center, and that was the first time I saw my dad in 5 months. And he drove me to this place and dropped me off. And he said, "You got to finish. If you don't finish, I'm done." And I did 11 months in this place.
And where was your mom?
My mom was struggling, just trying to survive. Yeah, she was in the hometown, but I didn't see her. She didn't come. I probably didn't see her for another 2 months until I got my first visit. The way it works is you got to kind of earn your passes. It was 2 months they came to visit. That's what it was. It was like 2 months, do good. The parents can come visit for like 6 hours on site. And then you kind of, over months, you get like a day pass and a weekend pass. But I would still go with my dad, because my dad was the kind of like the stable person in the parental relationship. My mom was still dealing with her demons. And, but this place literally saved my life. I did figured out what made me tick, and like the feeling management groups and the stories that I was telling myself about my self-worth and my confidence. And it was at the end of that program, I was helping Rick, the maintenance guy, clean out one of the cabins, because it was built on an old church camp. And in one of the rooms in this cabin, there was this old 486 computer. This is 1997. Just sitting there with a yellow book on Java programming sitting next to it. And I opened the book, and I'm like expecting, hieroglyphics and ones and zeros, and it's English, it's Java, JavaScript, if people are more familiar with that today. And I just sat there, and I don't know, I just felt like, I'll start this computer up and follow chapter 1. And after 20 minutes, I got the computer to print out "Hello World." And it was just like, something in me just thought, oh, maybe I'm like so messed up in other parts of my life because I have this gift of like computers or math. I don't know. Like, it sounds silly saying it, James, because I'm not actually that great of a programmer. If you meet these 10X programmers, that wasn't me. But that story of like, maybe that's my thing. And it literally replaced my addiction. And it became the thing I became obsessed about. I mean, dude, I was coding. I got out and shared it with my dad, and he really supported it. I had 2 passions: botany and plants, and computers. And he's
What?
like, yeah.
Why were you
Because I
interested
used to
in
grow
botany and
weed.
plants?
Yeah, I used to grow weed.
Oh,
I
yeah, okay.
literally,
Yeah.
yeah, my dad goes, you can always have a garden as a passion, but this computer thing you should focus on. And, I got out, and shortly after I discovered this little thing called the internet, and it couldn't have been better timing. And that's been my journey since then. As you know, like I built a bunch of different companies and just built software, just like code till 2 or 3 in the morning. I became like almost like a hermit, and that I'd meet some friends online, and we'd share ideas and build projects together. And, I built my first company when I was 17, 18. That failed, but I just started young, and it took a while, man.
Well,
it took a long time
what took a long time? Like succeeding,
to
or
figure out business. Yeah, I literally was
business
an
is hard.
idiot, man. I was like, it's funny because in hindsight, my dad had this rule. He said, if you read the whole book, so we'd buy like, HTML in 21 days, or like database design, or, I ended up getting my Microsoft Certified Solution Developer certification, which is like these 4 huge books that I had to pay $200 to do the test. And if I didn't pass, you only get so many attempts or you don't get it. And I don't know why. Again, I became obsessed with it. And he probably spent $3,000-$4,000 on books, and probably 100 different books. The whole computer section at our local, what we call chapters in Canada, like I just worked through it. CGI, Perl, ASP, like you name it. Yeah, Cold Fusion. A lot of people don't even remember that programming language. It was beautiful. And but I
Perl
didn't
was
read
my language of choice in that year.
Yeah,
This is like
it was a great one.
95 through 98. I was like the Perl years.
Yeah, Perl is like the go-to back then. And yeah, I did. I just read computer books.
I mean, I would say, and this segues to your book, if I could go back to the 90s and tell myself one thing about business, it would be the stuff you talk about in your book about buying back your time. But we'll get to that in a second. What was literally, holding you back from success? Like you were writing software, nothing yet had been written for the internet. So almost anything you could do was going to make money. Like, what was holding back your success, you think?
I think I fell in love with programming because I didn't have to talk to anybody. That was the belief I had. You write code, you build something, people go online, whatever. And I didn't understand marketing. I didn't understand teams. I didn't understand buying back your time, any of that. And it wasn't till I was 23 that I finally bought a business book. Like, that's what's crazy, James. I read 100 computer books starting at 17, and it took me 6 years to finally, the first book I ever bought was called Love is a Killer App by a guy named Tim Sanders. Because I was ADHD. I always told myself I couldn't read storybooks. I'd read like a paragraph and my brain would just go off into the ether, right? Computer books, for whatever reason, because I had like a purpose, I'd read books for things I wanted to build. So it was a lot easier for me because it's like, oh, I want to connect to a database. Okay, well, I need to buy a book on database design and one on some kind of like web language. And so I just didn't have the fundamentals of understanding marketing, teams, culture. And I didn't even buy a book. I bought an audio CD. That's how little I thought I could even read a book. I bought the CDs on break at lunch. I was consulting at the time. And I just became obsessed with reading business books. Like, it was this clear message. The guy, Tim Sanders, says, super accomplished chief creative officer at Yahoo at the time. So I admired his background and his passion. And here's a guy that obviously wrote a book. So like, I got to listen to him. And he said, you don't even read books for yourself, even though that's important. He said, you should read books for your customers. And that was like, what?
Oh,
like,
that's a really good point.
Yeah. And he goes, if you do that, then you can teach your customers what they should know, but they probably don't have time to learn. And you become the center of knowing. And I was like, that makes sense. So I went on this binge. I started with the classics. I started reading.
Like, what do you
books.
remember? Like I would think like that was 25 years ago, roughly. So what do you think anything that you remember now obviously really stood out for you then? What's something you remember now that you learned then?
Oh, the experience economy. Just like I read that book, and they just talk about like the customer experience and the journey. So like, to me, that influences the way I create activation flows. I mean, these are nerdy software things, but like, first time user experiences, time to first value. Like, is today, that's what I do. I write software. So it's like, understanding how the world works from an experience economy point of view, like with examples in restaurant and hotels, et cetera, and then bringing that to software. I felt like I had these like secrets that nobody knew about. I mean, I read everything from Never Eat Alone, Keith Ferrazzi. I mean, we met at an event. Why? Because I said yes and trust in a guy I never met, Jason Gaynard, because I was like investing in relationships. If I go there, I'm going to see some old friends. I'm going to maybe make some new ones. So like, Never Eat Alone had a huge impact on my life that's continued to carry forward. So many. I mean, marketing, just general, like, how do you position? Like, what does that mean? So many people in software, as you know, James, like, they can have the most brilliant idea, but because they can't explain what problem they solve and who they solve it for, it sits on a virtual shelf. Nobody signs up because it's just all those problems I had.
Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional, and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels,
and cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. This is such a valuable service for all business owners, big businesses, small businesses, doesn't matter. I wish I had this in the many different businesses that I've started. Sometimes it seems like your business is humming, but then suddenly you don't understand it. You're starting to fall behind. You're not understanding where your costs are, where your revenues are, where your payments are. Teams are buried in all sorts of like BS work, and you can't seem to close the books. So you need like one dashboard, one source of truth. I'm jealous of this business, NetSuite from Oracle, of course, NetSuite by Oracle. I wish I'd come up with this idea. It's a brilliant concept to have all your business intelligence on one dashboard. This is why you need to know these three numbers: 37,000, 25, and 1. So 37,000, that's the number of businesses which have upgraded to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, streamlining accounting, financial management, inventory, HR, and more. 25. NetSuite turns 25 this year. That's 25 years of helping businesses do more with less, close their books in days, not weeks, and drive down costs. 1, because your business is one of a kind. So you get a customized solution for all of your key performance indicators, your KPIs, in one efficient system with one source of truth. Manage risk, get reliable forecasts, and improve margins. Everything you need to grow all in one place. So right now, download NetSuite's popular KPI checklist designed to give you consistently excellent performance absolutely free at netsuite.com/James. That's netsuite.com/James to get your own KPI checklist. netsuite.com/James. Let's look at a real world experience. Like, tell me about Flowtown. That was like your first business that you
That was
sold.
the second company I sold. I sold a company called Spheric Technologies when I was 28. That made me my first million. I actually became a millionaire when I was 27 just through that company because we did enterprise portal stuff. Sold that when I was 28 and then moved to San
So
Francisco.
enterprise portal stuff, you mean like you would build like intranets for companies or?
100%. Yeah. Back in the day of like IBM WebSphere, we were helping people migrate off WebSphere. Microsoft SharePoint might have just came out then, but that was my world. Connecting the Fortune 500 to Fortune 5000 companies to their intranets and like their business software. So like SAP, I mean, all this stuff I would never do today, but I cut my teeth.
Was
like,
it a service company or like an agency?
both?
Was it a
We
product company or an
started
agency?
Yeah, we started as a service business and then we started building these connectors, these things called portlets. And then we ended up kind of migrating to software and that's why we got acquired.
Oh, that's great. Who acquired you?
A company called Function One. They were another service company in the US. I mean, it was single digit millions, not a big exit, but I owned 100% of the company. And
That's great.
for most people, that was like I honestly was like, I'm going to retire. I did it for 4 years, and that was my first success.
Was this a hard time for you after you sold the company? Like, did you have this money and like, did old temptations come back?
I didn't have temptations. I'll tell you what I did go through. I had an identity problem because my whole personal value was tied up in the business. And I remember I negotiated a 6-month advisory earnout, so like nothing too heavy. And the day I woke up and realized that nobody cared if I woke up, like it just like, I had to go see a therapist because I was having anxiety attacks. I literally would walk and I'm like a mental mindset positivity guy. And here I was having anxiety attacks in my body, physical, like chest, like pain, like felt like pressure in my chest. And the therapist, this guy, Manuel, he explained to me, he goes, like it's not much different. Obviously not the same. I don't want to diminish, but it's like losing a child, right? Like you birthed this business. It was who you are. Dan Martell Spheric, we won awards. I we built this incredible team, like all these things. And then all of a sudden it's gone, right? Like nobody cared if I came to work or not. The company that bought us took over operations, and, they were, they call me if I needed help, but they were very seasoned. And that was tough. That was a tough lesson. But no, I never went back. I did start drinking again, which I probably shouldn't have. I never went back to the drug stuff. And, today I'm 10 years sober. Like I quit drinking when my wife told me she was pregnant. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, okay. So Flowtown, what was that about?
Yeah. So Flowtown was a product for essentially helping people do social media marketing. The funny story about that is I didn't even want to start it. My co-founder, Ethan, I gave him the technology I'd built with the CTO I had on staff. Essentially, I went to San Francisco on sabbatical and just wanted to learn. But I had a full-time CTO, Scott, that would just write products create apps for me, essentially write the code. He was a 10X programmer. And I built this tool that would give you all the social media data and demographic data on an email address. So like back then there was a company called Rapleaf and other data providers. So we just like put it all together. So you give me a Twitter account or an email address and I would tell you everything else about the person. And that was a crazy ride because we ended up, I moved to San Francisco with this vision within a decade. I'd like to build a venture-backed tech software company and maybe exit it, like coming from Canada at the time. Even though I'd exited my company, like I still felt like I had a lot more in me. And Ethan took the technology and then he was like, we got to Ramen Profitable. And then he was like, I'm going to raise some money. This is early days of AngelList. So we actually reached out to Naval and Nivi, his co-founder. A lot of people don't know about Nivi, but Nivi was like, we lived next to each other in the Mission District in San Francisco. And like, I remember our first round, we were having a hard time raising. And we called him up and he's like, well, come over to the apartment. He's right by Dolores Park. He's like, come over and we'll jam on your pitch deck. And we showed him, and he's like, so what's the valuation? And this is like 2009, early days, not the current valuation, but we said 7. He's like, what are you raising? I said 700K on 7 million pre. And like, we're 17,000 a month in recurring revenue, like nothing. And he's like, how are investors reacting? We're like, yeah, they're not jumping. They kind of say that's cool and they're congratulations, but they, nobody's written a check. And we had done like a dozen calls. And he goes, yeah, it's a little rich. And he goes, why 700 on 7 million? I said, because San Francisco, this is how ridiculous we were. San Francisco is called the 7x7 city. And we had heard that Mint had raised,
I didn't know
I think
that.
600K, Mint.com. Yeah, Mint. Yeah, because there's 7 miles by 7 miles. It's essentially a square. And Mint had raised 600K at 6 million pre from first round. And we were trying to raise from first round. So, dude, we were so ridiculous. I was 28 at the time, 29. And Ethan was a lot younger. He was 25. And we were just like these uninformed optimist kids running around the valley with our startup idea. But dude, we got it done. We ended up doing the deal, I think, at 5.5, but we raised close to $1 million.
That's great. I mean, look, the fact that you were making revenues showed that people were raising their hand and willing to spend money on you.
Yeah, we were hustlers. I mean, that was the thing that every investor met with us. It's like, I was actually the technical behind the scenes guy. Ethan was the CEO, kind of buying back your time. And to that point, like one thing that people should understand is like, software spoke to a part of me that like the reoccurring model of it. And I think that like the systems thinking I developed architecting software and like growing up in so much chaos, there was something actually like beautiful about code for me, the procedural aspect of it, that I knew if I like wrote the code in a certain sequence for the rest of my life, as long as the computer ran, this thing would do its thing. So it was almost like the opposite of the chaos. And then the reoccurring aspect just created this predictability that I just, to this day, like I still only get involved in businesses with a reoccurring business model because I just love the ability to build and be rewarded for a value that somebody can decide to invest in or leave on a monthly basis.
So next week, I'm going to talk more with Dan about entrepreneurship, and I'm going to talk more about Buy Back Your Time, which you can pre-order at buybackyourtime.com. But also, I finally get a chance to talk to his wife, Renee, about what her reaction was when she first heard the story you just heard, and I had heard it the same time she heard it in 2013.
Entresto, sacubitril valsartan tablets, is the #1 heart failure brand prescribed by cardiologists and has helped over 1 million people with heart failure. It's a prescription medicine that treats adults with long-lasting chronic heart failure and works better when the heart cannot pump a normal amount of blood to the body.
Don't take Entresto if pregnant. It can cause harm or death to an unborn baby. Don't take Entresto with an ACE inhibitor or aliskiren, or if you've had angioedema with an ACE or ARB. Don't take with aliskiren or within 36 hours of taking an ACE inhibitor. The most serious side effects are angioedema, low blood pressure, kidney problems, or high blood potassium. Angioedema is swelling of your face, lips, tongue, and throat that may cause death. If it causes difficulty breathing, get emergency help.
Ask your doctor about Entresto. To learn more, visit support.entresto.com or call 833-446-6699. For pricing, visit Entresto.com/cost. If you can't afford your medication, Novartis may be able to help.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.